Hello, my name is Miguel Almario, and welcome to Speak. This is a show about empowering people in their mental health journey, and if you want to support us, please consider following our club social media at the I Am Collective. This episode is about systems and institutions and their role in how we see ourselves and society. I hope you enjoy the show today. So, this is technically the second time we've started this off. My internet crashed like basically 10 minutes into the first recording, and that's beautiful. It's never happened before, but we're breaking a lot of boundaries today. This episode is quite special in the history of the show. It kind of goes to show how far we've kind of come in the last few months. But if you weren't aware, this show is based in Calgary, Alberta. And so far, all the guests that we've had on have been from Calgary. And secondly, we don't typically do episodes beyond myself and one guest. And today, we threw both those things out the window, and also the whole streak of no technical difficulties. All of that went out. Uh, and we're lucky enough today to have two very interesting fellows from the University of Manitoba. And I'm beyond excited for what we have to share today. And, I've done a lot of talking so far, so I'll kind of let them go at it. These guys are Joseph and Daniel, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Joseph.
Awesome. Thanks, Miguel. So first off, we really appreciate you inviting us on to speak about men's health. Um, I guess just a little bit about myself. My family actually moved from the Philippines to Canada when I was 7. So been living in Winnipeg for my entire life, most of my entire life. And yeah, like Miguel said, we're both studying at the University of Manitoba. I'm in my 5th year of the Asper School of Business, and I am studying accounting, hoping to land a full-time job next May. Um, I guess just to give you guys a little bit of a background on my relationship or connection with Miguel. Miguel and I actually met at JDC West this past January before COVID. Um, and so other sort of um, extracurricular commitments I've made within school is also like being the co-captain of JDC this year, being president of the Accounting Association, being involved with the entrepreneurship group. So yeah, I've really tried to dip my toe into everything within school and also within the community. And then I've just been very blessed with opportunities to get involved with school. I would say like people have really taken a chance on me when they didn't have to. But yeah, I'm very lucky for where I am. And I just want to say like shout out to my girlfriend for just continuing to validate my feelings and my thoughts. My girlfriend and my family are really my main support system when it comes to life.
Beautiful. So that was all very well said. We'll go to Daniel now.
Yeah, so as Joseph said, once again, thank you so much for having us. I hope we can add some perspective and maybe some spice from Manitoba to your Calgary-based podcast. Yeah, we're super excited to be here. What I really liked, like what intrigued me to your podcast was just the genuinity of the whole podcast as a whole, and kind of your mission really struck with me and with Joseph we were talking about. So I think we'll have a great conversation today. A little bit about myself. I'm in my 5th year as well at Asper and at the University of Manitoba, and I'm doing an accounting and finance major. Once again, just like Joseph, I'm trying to land a full-time job, hopefully in May. We'll see how everything goes with COVID and everything, but fingers crossed. Just like Joseph, I'm also actually a first-generation immigrant, moving from Russia when I was like about 1 year old. So basically Canadian, but I was born in Russia. So that's, I guess, a unique thing about me. And yeah, I guess I like to think of myself as an entrepreneur. Like I like to always seek how things can be done differently or done better. And like as we're going to talk about today, how institutions can be better and how we can make changes in our life that can affect lives around us and people that look up to us and our family members and whatnot. And I tend to be fairly active on social media. Like I like talking about certain topics like current events. We'll get kind of into all those kinds of things today. And then like at school, like I guess like for involvement, I've done similar things as Joseph mentioned for himself. I've been part of student council, a variety of different student groups because in high school, I really didn't get involved. So I thought that university was the best chance to kind of get a clean slate, start building up my resume, start building up my connections. Yeah, so super excited to to be here and get it going.
Amazing. So we have two really interesting guys, at least if you couldn't tell at this point. First, I want to say big thank you for reaching out and wanting to be a part of the show. I will say that one, it takes a lot of courage to go out in public and speak on behalf of yourself and your perspectives and your feelings and whatnot. And it also takes a lot of courage to approach someone that you aren't very familiar with. And just a big disclaimer, me and Joseph did meet last year at JDC, but we only spoke for maybe 5 minutes. And Daniel and I had no idea who each other were until this time Monday. So a lot of barriers being broken, a lot of bridges being crossed. And uh, again, really big shout out to you guys for extending yourselves outward. And hopefully by the end of this episode, we have shared a lot of very valuable experience and very valuable insight into the world today. And yeah, I'm just overall very excited for what we have today. Um, and firstly, just to kind of go into the topics at hand, we're going to be discussing the world today, and that is current events, the different systems and institutions at play currently, as well as their role in how we see ourselves and how we see other people, situations, and whatnot. So, the first thing that we want to discuss is yes, obviously, this year has been quite an interesting one to say the least. And I feel at this point it is very cliche to say that. It's something that's kind of been driven into the ground. It is particularly stressful from the standpoint of injustice. And with the pandemic at hand, that's sort of pushed out all the underlying problems that have existed for a long time and continue to exist to this day. And particularly we see that with racial injustice. And of course there have been a plethora of different issues from environmental, etc., that have come to surface in light of COVID-19. But uh, particularly we want to focus on racial injustice today and how the pandemic has seemed to make that even more of a contentious subject, with all of us kind of staying at home and watching things transpire and things burn down from the comfort of our own homes. It is a very weird sensation. It's a very weird place to be for a lot of people. And a sensation that a lot of people can kind of sympathize with is this feeling of isolation, and how that we feel the need to act and want to act for the sake of good, but it sometimes isn't clear exactly how we can go about doing that. And the first discussion I want us to have today is, from that standpoint, and from being a person sitting at home and looking at current events, how has this sort of shaped your perception of action, and particularly good action, in order to, break down these barriers and institute real change? How have you guys kind of seen the idea of action and your relationship with it? I think we'll start with Joseph.
Yeah, so I guess like to start things off, I'm wearing a Colin Kaepernick jersey, so that does speak to where I stand on racial injustice. There's no place for it, um, and anywhere with society, whether it's with Black people, whether it's with Indigenous people, whether it's like minorities, disabled, you name it, the list goes on. But particularly with like the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been very prevalent with this year, in terms of on social media, and just how horrific the events have been, one after the other. Uh, to sort of speak on the current events, I think the biggest thing is I understand the privilege that I have in terms of speaking out and being able to raise awareness. One of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to Miguel and talk about mental health is because I feel like my mental health has really took a very big hit in terms of myself consuming all of this information and consuming just all the mistreatment that Black people have faced for 400 years now, and no one has done anything about it. There's still police brutality every single day, and it's unfortunate because like the only ones that we really know of are the ones that are videotaped uh, on camera, and the ones that we're seeing on social media. But this is a real issue when it comes to society today, whether like whichever part you are in the world, but most certainly you the like the US. Um, and so I think that for myself, like my perception of action is just learning to focus on the things that I can control, and everything else that I can't control is something that that I can sort of just educate myself more on, and provide myself and equip myself with the tools necessary to sort of take that next level of action. So um, I would say like a lot of the
Did Joseph disconnect or did I disconnect?
I think Joseph disconnected.
Ah, okay. So Joseph has dropped off the call. I think he'll join us again in a bit, but he said a lot of very important points here, particularly with when we look outward and we understand our privilege in these circumstances. Uh, it really governs how we view ourselves and the impact of our action. And before we kind of continue, or I continue forward, Daniel, how have you kind of seen your relationship with action at this point?
So yeah, before Joseph cut off there, I think I fully agree with everything he said. There shouldn't be any sort of misunderstandings or debates around racial injustice, which we've seen a lot this year. I think one of the points that Joseph really hit and nail on the head was with knowing kind of our place in the role as a whole. I think one of the most important things is just if you have the ability to be a voice for the voiceless, that's a task you can take on, and that's something that I've kind of done. And I think he really kind of drove that home, where it comes down to being uh, taking things in moderation. When it comes to social media, like social media can be a great, amazing tool, but it can also be the worst thing in the world at times. You scroll through your feed, all you see is COVID this, COVID that. You see Black Lives Matter. You see racial injustices all across the world. There was like the SARS issue in Africa. All these things, and it's kind of sad when you're sitting in your own room and you feel like there's not really much of a difference you can change. Like, unfortunately, I can't just go and fix the whole Black Lives Matter injustice like from my own seat. But I think it's just something that we have to kind of keep building towards. And also, it really is important to check in with yourself and kind of know where you're at. Because once again, as Joseph mentioned, it takes a toll on you mentally when there's all this infeed of all this information and you're just taking it in. And at some point it becomes a lot, and you kind of stop believing in yourself and you have doubts about where you stand and how your role can play into the broader issue. And then that just goes into a quote that I always tell myself and I write in my journal every so now often is be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think it's really important that in this, especially with COVID and being in this lockdown, it's really important to, like I said, kind of check in with yourself and realize your privilege. I come from a place where I feel like I have a lot of privilege. I definitely can't relate to what some of these people are going through with racial injustice. And I'm very grateful to be put in that sort of kind of life where I can sit in the comfort of my own home and raise awareness on these issues. And I think that's something that's like God just blessed me with. And it's really important to realize like the kind of glass half full approach where yes, there's so much going on in your life, but things could be a lot worse. And it's really important to kind of take a step back. And I think a big thing, a big human behavior is that we always tend to overweigh the ungrateful things in our life, and then we underweigh all the things we're grateful for. And then we have this kind of misalignment where there's so many things to be grateful for, but for some reason, and that's just a human nature, and I'm guilty for that. I'm assuming you guys can relate to that too. We always pick out the bad things in life, and that's what we focus on. And I think it's really important to kind of take a step back, look at your life in general, and really evaluate not just your privilege, but what you're grateful for, and all those kinds of things. And I guess I'll end off this question by saying another important thing is just to pause, take some time, like we were saying, like we've been drilling in, like just take some time to yourself to realize where you stand with the issues. It's really important to kind of pause, and you don't need to always be active on social media. You don't need to always be up to date with the news if that's not what's in your best interest and best for your mental health. It's really good to kind of pause on that. I mean, I've been journaling every now and then for the past couple of years. And the four things I always kind of the way I structure my journal, and that's another topic, I guess, but I'd say one thing I'm grateful for, one thing that made me feel vulnerable in the day, one acknowledgement about like how I feel or something that happened positively in my day, and then finding clarity where I kind of just go over my goals and where I see myself. And I feel like that it's helpful for me, not for everyone, but it really keeps me grounded and really takes me back to like I don't know, like this person said hello to me at the store or something today as just like a small point of gratitude. And I think just grounding yourself and realizing that there are things to be grateful for is really helpful when it comes to these matters. But like I said, it's really important to kind of see where we stand with the issue. And if we do have a voice, kind of be a voice for the voiceless, and kind of make their issues be heard, because we do come from a place of privilege where we do have the right to free speech and the right to kind of address where we stand with the issue.
Very beautifully said. I think Joseph and Daniel both touched on something really big here, and something that has become more and more of an issue for a lot of people. And it has been our relationship with social media and our our uh, constant view of the world through this, the lens of your phone. And for a lot of us, we kind of get relegated to just feeling like an observer and feeling isolated and feeling extremely helpless. And it is a very difficult relationship to kind of manage, because on one hand you feel very passionately for these people and you feel a great degree of empathy and sympathy for the issues that are currently happening with the Black Lives Matter movement, and even with just the general angst of COVID and the difficulties that it's been putting onto countries, on the economy, et cetera, et cetera. You definitely feel this degree of helplessness. And what Daniel and Joseph both kind of touched on is, reclaim what you can and understand how much you can control and how much you can, one, influence other people to have a voice in these issues and recognize their privilege in these matters, but also, you know, understand that if you're feeling distress in these moments, and if you're feeling extreme anxiety from perceiving things outward, and seeing the degree of injustice that's happening, if you're feeling uneasy about it, it's because you care. And at the end of the day, it's something that uh, you should take some relief over, because you do recognize that there are issues in the world, and you do recognize that you want those to be resolved for people. And I guess the next point under this conversation would be, how have you both have talked about this dynamic that you intend on striking in social media, and that idea of regaining control. And we've seen that in this kind of negative light so far, with how it affects your mind and how it affects other people, and that can weigh a ton. But since understanding that, and understanding that relationship, and trying to regain that sense of agency over yourself and how you see your emotions, how you see other people, how have current events and this relationship kind of changed or altered your perception of yourself? And how have you kind of, learned from what's been happening nowadays? And we'll go in reverse. We'll start with Daniel this time.
Honestly, great question. I think it's great to kind of talk about the negatives that we see, and then also how we specifically have changed through this process, because so many lives have been changed by injustice. And luckily, some lives have been changed more dramatically than others. Some people lose their lives, unfortunately. Some people face mental health issues in terms of taking in all this media and not knowing where they stand. So I think everyone kind of faces the injustice in the world just at different points. And unfortunately, some more than others. Personally, I've realized that I have a big role in shaping the world of the future. And I think that's something that all millennials, all Gen Zers can agree with, that it is really important that we do take things into our hands. Everything from Black Lives Matter and racial injustice to things like COVID to global warming. There's so many issues. I feel that this is the best time. You can see it as the best time or the worst time to be living. You can see it as the best time in terms of this is our time now to change things, or you can see it as the worst time as being ungrateful for, like I said, ungrateful for the smaller things in life, and kind of being ungrateful to our predecessors and people who kind of left us with this world. But I think regardless, I think it's really important to have a future outlook and not look about the things that have been done in the past, but what are we going to do moving forward? What kinds of steps are we going to take to move the Black Lives Matter into full gear and really get the justice that these individuals deserve? Same with Indigenous lives in Manitoba, or in Canada. What are we going to do to change these issues? I feel like these are all like super important issues of our generation that we're going to ultimately have to solve, or we're going to keep bearing these negative consequences from individual to individual. And I've also realized the like validation on social media is huge. We always post things on social media. And like I said, social media can be the best tool, but can also be the worst tool to ourselves. And what I've realized over this time is that there's a lot of toxicity on social media. And I've always grown up wanting everyone to like me. Like in high school, like I hated knowing that like somebody didn't like me for something that I did, or the way I looked, or what have you. So that's always been something that's been really hard for me to overcome, is how do I stand for what I believe in, but also not be like the unpopular opinion in the room, I guess. And what I've realized is you can't have both. You, at some point, there's a trade-off, and not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to agree with your opinions. But that's okay, because I feel like we have a role. And like I said, we have a voice, especially for those who are voiceless. So we kind of have the privilege to share these things. And although it sometimes may be the unpopular opinion in the room, or the unpopular post on Instagram that everybody's debating and some people may disagree with, I think that we do come from a place where, I mean, it's okay for people to disagree. That's what debates are about. And I think it's really important to kind of take that into our hands. And for me, it was just important to embrace the fact that I have a personal agenda. I have things that I want to accomplish in life. I have like end goals. I have goals on where I see the world 10 years from now and how we have a role in that, like I mentioned. And I think kind of pushing our egos aside and kind of putting aside that theory of everybody in the room having to like you, I think is a really important thing, at least for me, and kind of being comfortable to voice my opinion on social media. And I mean, you always get people who disagree with you, and that can kind of even feed into the imposter syndrome of where you feel like you're not qualified. Like you'll have debates with individuals, whether it's about Black Lives Matter, or I had a conversation with somebody, or a debate, I guess, on COVID last week on social media. And there are times where you have the unpopular opinion and you will get criticized for your opinion, and it may make you feel like you're not qualified. But at the end of the day, like I said, we all have a voice. At the end of the day, we all have our opinions. And I think it's really important to voice our opinions, especially for the people who can't voice theirs.
Very beautifully said. Before I jump in, Joseph, same question. How has current events and your relationship with, social media and your agency, how has that kind of affected your self-perception?
Yeah, for sure. So Daniel actually gave a lot of good information there, because one thing I do want to wrap this into is just like, when I watched the Social Dilemma documentary, it really hit home, because I felt like a lot of the things that I'm consuming, a lot of the posts, the graphics that I'm encountering every single day, they're strategically placed there for me to feel some sort of way. and it's a way for me to continue scrolling through my social media feeds, really going to the very bottom of the feed, uh, understanding like what everyone's up to, what everyone's saying about certain issues, and caring what other people like what caring about the stance of other people. I mean, it's good to be considerate of what other people are saying, but also I think you have to understand that you have to learn and also think for yourself as well, because with social media you can be easily influenced by misinformation, um, and in terms of convincing you to think a certain way, to go against a certain group. And so I think you have to really be able to think for yourself, critically think for yourself, and that takes a lot of vulnerability, which then ties in like being self-aware. And so being self-aware of what are your trigger points, what are the things that are going to sort of take you take you out of your day, and what are some of the things that are going to emotionally trigger you as well. Because I had a lot of those moments, that cognitive dissonance within the like just understanding all of this information. I never watched a George Floyd video that was 8 minutes long, but seeing all the protest and how people can perceive it as riots, or rather like the media just focusing on the violence, but meanwhile they never really dug deep into why are these actions being taken. It's because people have had enough, and the system hasn't changed. People like the important representatives in our society are not listening either. And so I think it's just a matter of um, yeah, just being able to sort of think for yourself, and then with thinking for yourself as well. Daniel already touched on like the imposter syndrome. I feel that in a lot of ways as well when it comes to like talking about COVID, talking a lot about the Black Lives Matter movement. Not everyone is going to be on the same page as you or on the same wavelength. Like you can't expect like the terminology that we use is like being woke, right? And but the thing is like everyone is going to be is gonna come into that realization of like what the reality is for certain people in different parts of their lives. And like because like like for example our parents, they come from a different generation, they've been conditioned and wired differently than us. So yes, we might they might you might see your parents as being outdated or not with the times, but you have to sort of be patient and also educate them on these issues. um, and as well, just like you know I think also just not discrediting yourself, the voice that you have. There's a reason why you care about certain things. There's a reason why you want to stand up for certain issues. And Miguel said this at the very beginning of the podcast. It's because we care. And so uh, it doesn't make you less of a person if you don't care about certain issues, but you do have to understand sort of the responsibility and the privilege that you have. And the the minimum that we can do is by educating ourselves on just what the issues are and being aware of them. And then last point I want to make is just about self-esteem. So with self-esteem, I know after watching The Social Dilemma and also just um, learning, like being more aware about the Black Lives Matter movement, it really made me critically analyze who I'm following, who's following me, because with social media you sort of have access to everyone's like profiles, right? And once I sort of figure out that like some people were not as vocal or um, worried about other things in life, which they can rightfully do so. I felt like I needed to sort of remove those people out of my you know my sort of feed. And so yeah, don't you shouldn't be afraid whatsoever on sort of pulling that trigger and unfollowing people if because it is social media. It's one, like how you treat someone in person is different from how you should feel with how you interact with them on social media, right? It doesn't break the relationship. It just means that like you guys see differently, and you just have to accept that. And yeah, just do more like a social media audit of sort of who you want to present yourself to other people. um, yeah.
Hmm. And I think Daniel and Joseph had a lot of very valuable things to say there, and I think I want to jump back to a point that Daniel introduced first, and that was, we we are very exposed to media online, and we are exposed to a plethora of different things, and it's really important to keep that point in mind that yeah, people are seeing different things depending on where they are, and you're really uh you're you have to walk this really thin line of how much can I personally commit to this versus how much am I letting uh the outside world kind of impact my life and my self-perception to the point where you're feeling helpless perpetually, and that's not a point that we can ever accept indefinitely, because you might want all the good in the world, but you can't really be a part of that change if you're just stuck feeling helpless. And I think that's a position that a lot of people end up finding themselves in. And with what Joseph said too, that there is a lot of different media out there, and your family can sometimes be against what you fundamentally deem as the right step forward. And it becomes really really difficult when it seems that the entire environment around you hasn't exactly uh you know evolved to a point that you are comfortable saying that we've made progress as a society, or we made progress as people. And it becomes really difficult when you start looking at things holistically, because you want to believe that we've been doing good, and you want to believe that the people that you're closest with are on the same page as you are when it comes to injustice, and when it comes to global issues. But sometimes it's not easily the case. So with what Joseph said as well, you need to kind of reevaluate who you're letting within your circle, and who you're seeing, and who you're allowing to see your material and who you are. It's kind of difficult to you know accept that your perspective is the only one, or your perspective is the right one, when everyone around you is seeing different things and expressing things in different ways. And it all amounts to just this weird sensory overload where you want to care, and you desperately do care, but the kind of pathways to make that known, the pathways to actually make change, kind of get muddled. And it goes kind of in hand with uh our next topic, and that is the environment that has kind of shaped us up to this point, where you know at the end of the day we do have a part to play, and we want to be accountable for things, and we want to I think something that everyone here can kind of agree with is we want to push things forward, and we want the world to be better in the future. But in order to kind of understand how that will look, and the processes that we need to take to make that happen, we have to understand the environment that has shaped us. And we've kind of talked on it briefly already, but it's things from schools to businesses to the government itself. These large institutions and these systems have shaped the way that not only we look at media and we look at current events and how we perceive the outside world, but they've also been instrumental in developing how we view action, and how we view the correct course of action is to take when we are confronted with these things. And that entire web, that interconnected mess, can take a very large toll on your mental health, because you might look out and think that you want this to end, you want racial injustice to end, or you want the mistreatment of our environment to end. But the entire space around you, and the bodies of the systems in play that would have, provided you the tools to understand what action is, they have kind of muddled that. And now, your connection to the future seems a little bit uh, confusing. So it's that relationship like continues to make a lot of people feel helpless. So I guess that, that's kind of a bleak point to leave on, but um, you know, how have these systems and institutions kind of affected you guys personally, in terms of, how you view the future and how you view what correct actions are, and that's very front loaded. There's a lot to go into there, but also, how have you reacted to it, given that you've been raised a certain way and the world around you has acted a certain way? How have you kind of cultivated certain actions, certain thoughts to respond accordingly so that you can still achieve, the future that we believe we want? And again, that was a very loaded question. Hopefully, we can kind of take it piece by piece, but this time we'll start with Joseph.
For sure. So I'll start off with the first sort of like big body institution, right, which is schools. So one of the biggest things that university has really shown me is that I shouldn't be associating my worth, my personal value, to how high or how low my GPA is. I always felt like I always made that sort of connection with the two together. That that I'm this smart or I'm this dumb because of my GPA. And you know, a lot of people say like you're sometimes book smart doesn't equal to street smart, right? And so I think that like with institutions like such as schools, I've just been able to learn that that there is a world out there, and business school has really fostered this. Is that there's a world out there other than your studies, other than trying to get the highest grade. It's about the lessons that you learn within your classes. It's about the connections that you're making with people. It's the network, right? That's a key term in business school, the network that you create. And so moving forward in the future, when I sort of see my network now, and with the recent events that has taken place with the Black Lives Matter movement, i've I've associated the Black Lives Matter movement as part of my brand. That's part of my identity. That is something that will always going to be that is something that I will always going to that I'm always going to carry. That's something that like when people like when people think of myself, I don't want them to think of like Joseph from the Asper School of Business, or Joseph from, because of co-captain or whatever. I want people to know me as an ally to the Black Lives Matter movement. I want them to know me as a good person. I want them to know me as someone who listens to them, someone who is, someone who cares about them. And so, sort of like with schools, that's sort of what I want to touch on with schools. But with businesses, like what I want to talk about is just like being intentional with what you want out of business. Like currently, right now, I'm going through CPA recruitment, and some of the questions I'm thinking about for my interview is like, what are you doing regarding like equity groups? How are you promoting like inclusion within your work environment? And so just having those like very transparent conversations with management, with the people that can actually make a change, or can at least like push it forward to the higher ups. Because if you never say anything, then nothing's ever going to be solved, and nobody's ever going to know that this wasn't an issue in the first place. So sometimes you do have to take that leap of faith, like grow your wings. And if you stand for something, then yeah, be vocal about it. um and yeah, because the other thing that I want to make a note of is just like our overall environment. Like we're the products of our own environment, right? Like how social media has become an environment in itself, right? And we're the products of it. We're the products of our own like data that we're giving out. Um, and then I would say like a lot of the like I wanted to touch base as well on like just the church, like the church body as well, because like I am a Catholic, and I'm from a Catholic family, and you know, religion and faith is a very big thing. But what I want to say is that like just how progressive the sort of like the the church has been, and regarding like homosexuality, and so um, I know there's still a lot of steps to be taken forward in the future and regarding like including everyone, making sure that everyone's feeling safe and secured, and just like having like having like a strict focus on like what's important, and which is like you know, the higher up, right? Like God, or like the higher power, whichever you believe in. So just like um, on the lot, like on the note of church as well, like I think that what I've understood is like my role, it's not just praying, it's to take action as well. And so that's how church has really shaped me. And knowing that it's not just the things that I think about, but it's the things that I do, it's the things that I live by every single day. And so yeah, that's sort of what has made me the way, like who I am right now. And as well just like uh, where I see myself, like where I see the future going with schools, like businesses, and yeah.
Hmm. And I think first thing I want to say is, Joseph, thank you for being so uh, genuine and being vulnerable with like how you are perceiving the institutions and the environment that have shaped you at this point. Before I jump in, Daniel, I would love to hear your take on, this relationship and these institutions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's a lot to kind of unbox, um, and kind of it's a big loaded question. I think the main thing is, and disclaimer, this is like my unpopular opinion, which some people may think, but I think that there's a lot of corruption when it comes to high school education, post-secondary education, government, social media, all those kinds of things. And I think a lot of that corruption has kind of stemmed from a long time in the past, and it's been kind of creating issues for how we identify ourselves and how we see ourselves. Um, the first one, I really liked what Joseph said about your self worth isn't tied to your GPA. That really struck forward with me, and I feel that on a deep level. Just take a step forward. Just looking at my notes here, I also said that your self worth shouldn't be tied to your mental state, shouldn't be tied to your number of friends that you have, and shouldn't be tied to your net worth either. Um, so I went to an all boys high school, graduated in 2016. And basically, if you weren't on like a sports team, you basically were like the unpopular kind of fellow. Um, so I think it's really important. Like there was basically St. Paul's was like the definition of a toxic high school environment. And uh, what I learned was that you really need to not associate things that people may like say about you or think about you with your self-worth, because that can be really damaging, not just in high school, but like for years to come, because those are things that kind of sit with you. I was listening to, it was either a podcast or a book, and basically it was a story of this girl who she was, there was a girl who came home one day and she was like singing to her mom, and her mom had a really bad day. And her mom told her like, shut up, like you're singing horribly, like I don't want to hear you right now, like stop singing, like and that kind of scenario. And then what happened for the years to come is this girl never wanted to sing again. And then about 10 years down the road or whatever it was, she sang to this one stranger and they said, your voice is beautiful. Like, why haven't you like kind of blown up? Like, why haven't you been singing to everyone? And it's because of this one thought that somebody planted in her, this one seed that somebody planted in her, this toxic kind of seed, just because they were having a bad day. Like her mom probably loved her with all of her heart, but it was just this aspect of we take criticism very deeply. and it kind of scars us very deeply. And I think that the reason I told you this story is because I think it's really important to realize that some people may say things about you, but they might not necessarily mean it, or they might have their own deep rooted issues, and that's just kind of their way of unloading it on you. And I think that's really, really important when we're thinking about kind of how institutions and individuals in your life kind of shape you and build you to who you are to be, because unfortunately we do feed into all these individuals and what their opinions are on us, and we do let people plant sometimes toxic seeds in our mind that 10 years down the road, you can still have depression, you can still have anxiety from these things that were said that at the time were pretty meaningless in essence. I think the big other thing about going to an all guys high school is that mental health really isn't a topic. It's definitely something that's underrated. It's not even a topic that's covered by the institution in general, and more so, it's not something that you can really talk about because, like I said, it's this kind of toxic male environment where you don't feel comfortable to kind of share how you truly feel. Like, for example, you can't like go and cry in the locker room. You can't do any of these kinds of things, especially from a male standpoint, because we're kind of taught to be macho and that we're kind of taught to suck up our feelings. So I think that's one of the biggest things that's really shaped me into who I am today, was this sort of corruption within this institution. And I think that things really need to change. The other, not so much an institution, but something that's really shaped me is the idea of like an immigrant household. So I'm assuming both of you can kind of relate to this, but I come from a Russian background, like I mentioned earlier, and you can't really cry in front of your parents. You can't do this, you can't do that, because, and I think Joseph may have mentioned this in the previous question, but our parents were raised in a different generation. And it's unfortunate because we kind of have to suck it up at times, and we have to kind of deal with these kind of misalignments in our beliefs. But our parents, unfortunately, they were raised in a different generation where they had different problems. They had problems of how to keep food on the table and how to make enough money to survive, is basically what the big topics were. Mental health wasn't at the top of their priorities. So when it comes to today, they just don't really understand where their children may be coming from when it comes down to mental health, because they haven't lived through that. So it comes down to really understanding that emotions are really healthy. And whether you come from an immigrant household or if you're Canadian or what have you, I feel like all of us just really need to embrace our emotions, and especially from a male standpoint, like females as well. But a big thing recently has just been males embracing emotions and being okay with sharing things. And I think all of us are very open with sharing things, not just on this podcast, but on social media, and being comfortable sharing our opinions on Black Lives Matter and so forth. So that's kind of another, not so much institution, but that's something that's kind of created who I am today, and really affected my outlook on life. And it's been bittersweet, because there's the aspect where, like, yeah, there's these kind of negative seeds that I've been raised with and that I've had to deal with from a toxic high school environment. But I feel like I wouldn't be as strong as I am today if it wasn't all those experiences that I've had to go through and kind of cope with. Like, yeah, they were the worst things in the moment, but kind of being able to, like I mentioned before, find things that you're grateful for, whether it's like the smallest things that happen in your day. Like, I'm grateful for all these experiences that I've had to kind of overcome and deal with, because I feel like I've been able to take away very valuable kind of information that I can share with people in my circle and share with people that care to listen to what kind of my story and what I have to say. But yeah, and then I guess the other kind of institution as well, I think there's a lot of corruption in government. And I won't speak too much about government because that's not really my kind of area of expertise. But what I will say is that there's a lot of corruption, and the government kind of controls things when it comes to social media and general media outlets and kind of what we take in. And we talked about how our generation is so sensitive to things on social media, and social media is, I don't know the statistics, but it's arguably the source that we take in the most information. It's probably the source that shapes us the most as a human. So it's unfortunate to see big institutions that should kind of be taking a proper role and kind of promoting healthy relationships and kind of like a healthy landscape to kind of feed into this information. Unfortunately, I feel like there's a lot of misregulation when it comes to government and media and kind of false information and the things that we're kind of taking in. So I think that's also kind of an institution, kind of a barrier moving forward that we, like I said, as millennials and as Gen Zers kind of have to take into our hands. How are we going to change government policies? How are we going to promote a race-free kind of environment, or a racism-free environment, I should say. All these kinds of things are really important to consider with institutions, and then even with post-secondary education as well. There's a lot of injustice towards students where post-secondary educations, their mission statement is literally to promote the economic well-being of the society and of their students. But it does seem like there is some inconsistencies in kind of their agendas and what their goal really is, which is unfortunate because you look at some places with very strong kind of post-secondary institutions and ideologies. And I think we as students kind of face these burdens, like everything from these massive student loans to mental health because we can't get the best education possible for us. And all these kinds of things, all these institutions, as you mentioned, Miguel, really feed into kind of who we are today and kind of our future outlook. And I think just a takeaway of everything that I've kind of said here is we really tend to, like I said, we tend to discount all the like criticism that we receive in life, or all the compliments that we receive in life, and then we tend to overweigh all the criticisms. So I think it's really important to look at all these institutions and realize how we kind of play a role in moving forward, and kind of take all these institutions and all the kind of maybe injustices that have been done to ourselves and our community, and realize, first of all, what has been done, as Joseph said, educate ourselves on the issue, and then how are we going to take what we've learned and all these injustices and all these horrible things that may have happened in our personal lives, and how are we going to change the world moving forward. And that's a big broad statement, and there's a lot, as you said, to kind of unpack in that, and kind of there is a big role for us, but I think it's just something that we have to kind of take on as a role and as a society. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot said there that I really want to go back into, and primarily I want to pull a bit from what Joseph said earlier about, you know, being from a business school and getting that realm of education. You realize how much businesses kind of impact, you know, the entire uh, environment around them. And there's a lot of power that businesses have in shaping not only like policy, but the behavior of the people that, uh, receive benefit from their activities. If you are someone living in a neighborhood that has a supermarket nearby, a superstore, whatever it is, superstore has sort of this role and this impact on you as an individual. And kind of touching on what the biggest point I think, Joseph, with with the business standpoint, is that we're kind of now receiving this uh, better understanding of our role as incoming graduates, that we can impact things, and we do have potential to affect the communities and the people around us, purely on the basis of, we've cracked open this door. We are now part of this club of business people that will be impacting how lives are lived. So, as incoming graduates, we do have a very prestigious position here of, when we go in and we assume the full-time work, assume uh, these positions of, where as a kid you wouldn't necessarily have this influence, but now you do. And I think we're kind of lucky in that sense that uh, our schools are teaching us to, be leaders, and you use your influence as a source of good. And I'm, in that realm, I'm very optimistic for people our age, because we're taught to kind of be holistic with our decision making. And I think that it's something that, the three of us can echo. Even though Daniel and Joseph come from a completely different institution, we're all taught to kind of view these things holistically, and understand the role that we have to play. So I thought that was very, very powerful. And then the second bit and this is more so on what Daniel said about school, is you might think it's a little bit uh, out of the blue to talk about high school at, at the stage where we're about to graduate and we're about to be full-fledged adults. But what Daniel said is completely 100% true. There is some shit that you probably heard in 10th grade that you hold on to that has made an impact onto your soul, onto your heart, whether it's like, you can't sing and now you hesitate to pick up any mic at a karaoke bar. As something small as that, to someone in ninth grade might have said that you have a big forehead. And these are very comical examples and we can laugh about it, but for a lot of people, this is where their insecurities kind of start from. And it's this weird dynamic that we have as children, doing things that we think are playful and doing things that, we don't perceive the harm that it can leave with people. But as you grow up and, these things don't necessarily leave, you get a lot of really jaded individuals who, you know, in light of a pandemic, in light of injustice, they might be harboring emotions and resentment for people that prevent them from understanding their impact on the rest of the world and their impact on change. So it might seem a little bit uh, all over the place in terms of what we've been discussing today, but it's all really connected. It's all really part of this grander scheme of, you know, the world is curated in this way, and things are happening in these ways where children are harboring emotions that they take forward, and now they're a little bit stifled in their ability to learn about themselves and their ability to impact the world, because the institutions have kind of in some ways really excelled in providing us opportunities to be better, but in other ways too we have felt the damages of that, and we felt the bits of negligence that unfortunately exist. And it kind of goes into our last topic here about progression and growth. And when we look at these things and we look at this relationship, now that we've kind of seen the entire web of, like, you know COVID and injustice and the current events have pushed this out of us, where we can examine where we're from, the factors that have played into it. And going forward, we have identified some of these issues. We know that there are problems within our systems and our institutions, and at the end of the day, we all want better. And it doesn't matter if you're a university student like us, or if you're working as an electrician currently, or if you're going to trade school, whatever. People our age, we want better, and we're in the most prime position to kind of guide what better looks like and define what better looks like, and be a part of that change and instituting that change. So the last couple bits of questions here is, what does better look like to you guys in general? Like, what does the concept of better look like for you guys? And Joseph has his mic unmuted, so I think he wants to start us off.
Yeah, so I just wanted to actually just go back on like a little bit of the institutions part. I think that when a lot of university students, uh, because high school and university are so different, right? In terms of the independence, in terms of your schedules, right? There's a lot more free time when it comes to university, and you're not seeing the same people every single day like high school. And I know personally, in my first year, I felt really lonely. Like from the like orientation, from the very first day of orientation, to just like the rest of that first full year. And I think that I'm pretty lucky to be like a business student, because like you're just sort of like pushed into these group projects, into these student groups, and to get involved and grow your network, right? But uh, I think we also have to consider like all of the other university students that sort of don't have that community or that group that they can reach out to. And one thing I just want to like sort of like nail down is that like you're not alone. Like you're not alone when it comes to like how you're feeling, like any insecurity that you're feeling, like any sort of anxiety that you feel towards like lectures, like presentations. And I think the best way is just to sort of kind of just like slow, like it's not like I wouldn't say like you have to like join a group or anything like that, or but just like uh whenever you like whenever you sort of are feeling down, like I think like it's just like saying hi to, like, it's maybe it's like simple acts like saying hi to, your classmates, or trying to sort of like make a friend in your lecture. And so I think like those small actions really like compound to bigger ones. And yeah, I just want to sort of like like empathize like with other university students, because I know there are a lot of other students, like business students, like actually business students are also not excluded from this conversation as well, of like feeling sort of like alone, and not feeling like they belongs to a certain group. um but yeah, I think just it does get better in terms of like when it does get better, but you do have to sort of like extend your hand to someone else, right? Whether it's like someone from like the institution itself, like a professor, or like your classmate. But yeah, you do have to sort of extend your hand, and you don't have to extend it fully, but just like meet someone halfway, right? Because like other people are feeling the same way as you are, and the insecurity and the anxiety. But to your point, like Miguel, when you ask like what's better, I think I already a little bit talked about this, but just like listening and reciprocating come hand in hand. And what I mean by this is like if you listen the entire time and you're not reciprocating whatsoever, yes, it's good because you're consuming all of that like knowledge and information. But the thing is, like, how is that? How is this person that you're receiving information from? How are they going to know like that you're that you're that their voice is important, and what they said matters to you? Um, and then if you're reciprocating the entire time, then you're just not listening to what the other person's saying, right? And so you're not really getting to the core of what someone is saying. um, so I think both of those like really come in hand, very important things that like that you need to have in terms of like whether it's like in the workforce, whether it's just being a good friend, whether it's just being a good like human being. And then as well, just like less judgment, more understanding. I think you have to not make assumptions. Assumptions are really dangerous. This is something I sort of like had a conversation with my other friend. Just like not make too many, like don't make assumptions like in any sort of situation. Yes, it's very automatic that we sort of make assumptions on why someone may treat us this way, or why someone will 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 insult us, or will treat us badly or treat us poorly. um, but like sometimes it's like a projection, right, that that person makes, the instigator makes. And so um yeah, not make assumptions, just like trying to again extend that hand, trying to understand that other person in any way that you can, um because it's not your fault. I watched Goodwill Hunting like last week. That was like one of the like the key like lines. Um, I highly recommend it, but like it's not your fault if you're like the victim of, or if you've been feeling like a victim, because it's that other person's. And the other thing that I do want to mention as well is just uh, like being better, just means like just like acting by like the words that just acting by the words that you like kind of be inspired by. So just like transform, not just like, oh, not just having that mindset, but just like living through it, embodying it, day in and day out. Like, what do you stand for? What are your values? Being true to yourself. um and because at the end of the day, like you're you're waking up to your own self, you're going to bed with your own self, like, and there's only a finite amount of time we have on earth, so just like being honest, like living through your values, and everything else will work out for itself.
Beautiful. So first thing, Good Will Hunting slaps. Love that movie. I think if anything, if you're gonna take away anything from this episode, go watch Good Will Hunting. Um, but no, entirely echoing Joseph's point. There's uh, when we think about taking like formative action and wanting to instigate that change, it's a very beneficial exercise to kind of think about what inspires you and making that actionable. Like we have an idea of where we want to be, and that in a sense, being the best versions of ourselves. But it's very rare that we can kind of take that image and make it actionable. So I think on like what Joseph has kind of described so far has been on an individual basis. Look at your definition of better and formulate exactly how it is you can get there. And if you can kind of make that reasonable and make it things that you can follow and practice, then you'll reach there. And if you achieve that sort of that state day by day, and you're faced with these opportunities where you can make an impact on someone's life, then you're just better equipped to do that. And I think it's really important everything that Joseph has said in that last bit about better can come down to how you act. And it's important to remember your power in that. And I've jumped in already, but Daniel, what does better look like for you?
Yeah, so once again, fully in agreement with everything Joseph was saying. Just to tie things back, one quick second to post or to institutions. I really like Joseph's point about post-secondary. Like, I didn't want to sound doom and gloom with everything I said about corruption, all that stuff, because there are great things that the institutions are doing, such as like within Asper, like being able to have the privilege to be forced into student groups and student projects and so forth. I feel like I personally come from a background when I was younger where I would literally be so scared to go to like a grocery store clerk and ask them what aisle the bread was in. Like, that's the level of shyness I was at. And I feel like I've personally came so far from that. And that's not to boast like, oh, this is my personal development, but that's to show that I've grown this much from post-secondary education and being able to once again, going back to what I said, being comfortable being uncomfortable. I was able to kind of embrace like being part of these groups. Like, at first it was the scariest thing ever to go up in front of a class and do a marketing presentation, but those are kind of things that really build you to who you are today and really play a huge part. So if there's one thing that I wanted you guys to take away from anything I've said today, and what Joseph kind of was leading towards, is get involved. Like, I don't want to make this all about education, but I think involvement in post-secondary education and student groups has been the biggest thing for me personally in getting that kind of personal development in. Going on to what you were asking about what better looks like, Joseph took like a bunch of my points, so I guess I'll just like reiterate, I guess, my perspective of it. But like what Joseph said, I think was really powerful about less judgment and more understanding. I think I also in the past I've come from a background where I think we're all guilty of judging people based on what's on the surface, and I'm guilty for that as well. Where I've really realized that I do have to take kind of a step back from the situation sometimes and look at what's beneath the surface and really understand where the root of all of this this anger or this this kind of perspective is coming from. So I think the aspect of less judgment is really important for myself, and I feel for a lot of people our age to kind of take away from this. And then also take action. I think a lot of the time we place the blame on other individuals in our community. We place the blame on our parents maybe for raising us a certain way, or we place the blame on our predecessors for leaving us with a corrupt government and a world that's going to end in the next few years because of climate change, possibly, if we don't take action. I feel like a lot of the time we do play this blame game, and I'm guilty for that, where I like to point my finger at, like, oh, it's because of these people who let global warming get to the point that it's at right now. But I think it's really important to take a step back and say, okay, maybe they left us with this world, but pointing fingers is just going to keep delaying the issue, and we're not going to get anywhere with that. So I really try to pull it back and say, okay, they left us with this scenario, but how can I, in my life, or in my following, or in my social circle, be able to kind of promote change? If it's something like global warming, like how can I make choices in my household to make the world a better place to live on? And I think the other important thing is introspection and extrospection. So I think it's really important to introspect on yourself and understand who you are, understand your limits, as we've talked about for the past hour, about how important it is to really understand your emotions and kind of your role in the bigger kind of society. And an extrospection is basically, how can I now take my role, my understanding role of my emotions and my role in the community, and how can I go out and make this actionable change? Because I think a lot of people, and like I've done this in the past, is I just jump on it. Like with Black Lives Matter, I just started reposting. I started just going on and on. I started going off about Black Lives Matter and these racial injustices. And there came a point where I completely burned out. And there was a point where I felt like people thought that I didn't care about the movement anymore, because frankly, I just stopped posting about it. But it's because it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I got to this point where I was mentally exhausted from this huge intake, as we talked about, of taking in all this negative news and this negative information. So I think it's really important to kind of moderate yourself and kind of find an in-between where you are raising awareness based on your values of things you care about. But at the end of the day, you also have to take yourself into consideration and your mental health. And it's something that's really important to consider when you're taking on big issues that we face in our society today. And then I think the last thing I wanted to say was seek help. If you need help, whether it's therapy, I think there's therapy, and mental health in general is very stigmatized. I think it's really important in bettering your community. You also have to better yourself, as I said, that introspection aspect. And a big part of that is seeking help when you need it. We've all faced issues in life, and I feel like sometimes we feel like we're all alone in our situations, and we have to cope with it in our own ways. And we don't want to seek help from, whether it's your parents or somebody that you look up to. Joseph talked about guidance counselors in our conversations in the past, just things like that, where it's being okay and being comfortable with reaching out to people, because there are people out there who want to help our generation out. And we might arguably be the generation that's most exposed to a lot of these mental health risks and things that are associated with social media and media outlets and so forth. So I think, just to tie things together, seek help if you need it, and take time to figure out your role as a whole, and then how that can play into the community and how you can take actionable steps.
I just wanted to say a couple of things because I'm gonna forget this thought. But just in regards to like moderation, I know like Daniel and I, like we've talked about sort of like what we've done throughout like university, and like, but also just ease yourself into it. You know, start small, get 1% better. You know, like plan out your steps so that you're disciplined with your values. It's not, you know, sometimes like we talk about like motivation and stuff like that, but yeah, you could easily be burnt out, right? Like Daniel mentioned regarding like the large like consumption intake with social media, with the Black Lives Matter movement. I was in the same state as well. So I would say, like, looking back on it, I would just like ease myself more into it, because like, I mean, it sucks to say, but yeah, like eh, police brutality and like racial injustice is not going to be solved like overnight. And so yeah, just start small, feel yourself out, um, and that's my 2 cents on what Daniel just mentioned about moderation.
Beautiful. And, I want to take a moment to kind of recognize that we started this entire conversation off by looking at the biggest problems that we're exposed to. And, from racial injustice to the environment to, the entire situation with the pandemic. We've looked at everything from such a broad lens. And then when it came down to, how do we get better? What are the steps to getting better? That it's interesting how we've kind of focused in on, make it actionable and take your steps and do the little bit that you can every day. And, that amounts to something. And I think that uh, a lot of people, when they look at these big outstanding issues, when they look at mental health in general, they they want to work between the zero and the absolute 100 of, like we want to observe things in these extremes. But what ends up happening is we forget the small steps, and we forget that progress is made by doing the little bit you can every single day, and then challenging yourself to do more and to do more, and eventually we end up with what better looks like. So it's a very beautiful and poetic way to kind of surmise what we've been talking about. And I think that we have discussed a lot of very interesting and complicated issues, and I'm hoping by this point you kind of get the idea that, one, the biggest problems that we're seeing right now, they're not completely hopeless, and we do have a lot to say about progress, and we have a lot to say about how things get better. And also, I hope that in the process of listening to this episode, that there's a little bit of hope that sparks up when you realize that the three of us haven't really connected beforehand, but we have all decided upon better, and we've all chose to be not toxic men. And like, there's it's beautiful to kind of see that and to make these connections. And you know uh it's a point that we've kind of included in the notes. Maybe we haven't had a chance to touch on it, but we got to keep having these conversations. And we have to, you know in taking small steps to improve ourselves and to improve the world at large, take that opportunity as well to inspire the people around you. And I think that uh it's a very important piece, and it's a very important area that we can have impact, is immediately with the people in our communities and with our families and our friends, etc., etc. So I think with that, that kind of wraps us all up nicely with our biggest topics of today. Uh, Before we kind of wrap up, I'm again extremely thankful to have Daniel and Joseph here to speak on their own behalf and talk a little bit about how how they see the world, what makes them them. It's been a very fantastic almost 2 hours now. Actually, no, it's been exactly 2 hours now, but that excuses the technical issues that we had. But all in all, it's been a very fruitful conversation. Thank you guys so much for being here and for being yourselves. Any last little plugs you guys want to make? Any last little points? The floor is yours.
Last plug or two plugs actually. So I just want to. I'm not sure if the first edit kind of caught this quote, but like in regards to racial injustice and just speaking out, if you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So speak up. And then the second thing I want to say is that like sometimes you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on others. So just looking out for yourself. And then when you do look out for yourself, never say sorry when you're asking for help, because you reaching out to someone else means that they are worthy and that you respect them enough to ask for help. Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, so I think Miguel really wrapped it up nicely in saying that kind of we're all in this together. I think it's really important to recognize that there are people, and if you feel like you are kind of overwhelmed with all the information that you're receiving through social media or through your mental health kind of issues, I think it's really important to know that there are people out there who've 100% been in your shoes and 100% would love to have a conversation with you. Honestly, I'm super grateful for kind of my background, as I mentioned earlier, and I have had tons of struggles, but I've had tons of great things happen, and it's kind of built me into who I am today. And I think both of you guys can completely relate to that as well. Um, I mean, yeah, I'm just grateful for my social circle and my friends and family and everyone that's kind of built me up into who I am today. Um, and super shameless plug here of my social media. Uh, my Instagram is Daniel underscore Schink, Schink. And the reason I'm telling this isn't to like push my personal agenda, but rather I'm always open to have conversations. I sometimes post things about mental health on my stories, and like I love having these conversations. And I have people that sometimes reach out about certain situations that they're going through, and they just want to have a chat. So I'm always open to having a chat, whoever that might be, and provide my insight on the situation. And yeah, like I said, we're all in this together. So I think it's important to kind of use our resources and use our social circles. But yeah, thanks, Miguel, for having Joseph and I. It's a true blessing to be on here. So
Of course. Thank you guys so much for all the greatness that we've shared in this little bit of time together. Hopefully, we can stay connected and we can all kind of grow in this weird world that we have. But without further ado, thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care.